Okay, we're going to start with working with our Prismacolors. And I started this particular neutral. Here are two of my neutrals, and you can see I'm using complementary colors to create the neutrals. This is a blue and an orange. Here we have a green and a red. And we're going to use those two colors to create the neutral that you see at the top. Now, here's a nice even neutral, and here, as you can see with the one that I've completed, is a blended neutral. And the way that we do this is just by layering and starting with creating a darker color and going lighter, 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 and then the second color starting darker and going lighter, lighter, lighter. And as you can see, I started this here. So now what I will do, and I want to even some of this out as I'm looking at it. All right, so we want to make sure that we start at darker at one end, and then gradually as we get towards the end where it's very light, we're going to take more and more pressure off of our pencil and make it look graded. And we may have to go through this a couple of times in order, with each layer, in order to get the gradation that we want, because it's not going to happen all at once. So I'm going to put a light tone down first, and then I'm going to go back in with the green and grade it. And as you can see at the dark end, I've probably gotten it as dark as I want it for the first layer. And I'm going to just taper it a little bit more so that it isn't quite so heavy at this back end, and then get very light. So we want to add a little bit more color here so that the gradation starts to look a little bit more evenly applied. And of course, doing these exercises, this is a much more constrained way of working. If you were going to do a gradation on a petal, you would obviously be doing it based on the characteristics of the petal or the leaf, so that you might not have to do such a long distance gradation as you are here, because this is a pretty long gradation. But we want to get it, eventually we want the dark area to be as dark as this. So that's what we're going to do here. And we're just going to do multiple layers time after time until we get the color that we need. Alright, so once we've got the green finished, we're going to switch over to the red, and we're going to work with the magenta, which is the 930, and we're going to put on our next layer of color. So we'll start with a general overall light tone again, making sure to stop short of the lightest area. Very much the same way that you did continuous blends when you were doing these in graphite. So you have to stop short and feather it into the lightest area, because the second layer obviously is going to make the whole thing darker. So we're getting down towards the light end now. And I've got very little pressure on this pencil, and I'm just going to feather, lift the pencil so that it just kind of fades out into the lightest color. And now that I have that in there, now I can go back in and I can start to put in a little bit more gradation on the red before I do another layer of green. And you do want to start to think in terms of lightening up on the pressure again as you get towards the lighter end. So that you get this nice gradation going on. And with a gradation, you might find you have to fiddle with it a little bit as you get more and more layers of color on. But another layer of green. And we do this until we've got full saturation at one end and a nice pale shade of the blend, a neutral blend, at the opposite end of the bar. And this takes a little time because you do have to be patient with it, and make sure you pay attention to the values that are developing as you fill this gradation in. So this is how you achieve your blended neutral by continuous gradations of color. Now here at this light end, what you might want to do is take your white pencil and give it some color, or add white to this end and blend those colors a little bit. And then as you get towards the darker end, you can lighten up on the light pencil, or on the white pencil, a little less pressure. But what the white will do is blend all the colors. But because you're only going to put a very light layer of white in the dark areas, we can go back over the dark area again, and it'll give you a little bit more of an even tone. But adding the white in the lighter areas is almost critical in order to blend that neutral and get yourself a nice light value. So now what I'll do is I'll go back over the dark area just to bring those darks up again, because there is white on there, and you can see how nicely the color picks up and fills in. And you don't have to go too far with this, because we do want that white to have some sort of an effect in the medium areas as well as the lights. Now we'll put a little red down. And that should pretty much do it. And you have this really nice neutral gradation. Now these come in very handy when you have to do shadows, and we'll talk about those in another lesson and how to use them. But for now, it's nice just for you to know how to create these neutral gradations. Okay, so next we'll go on to black. The two colors I chose for black are the Raisin, which is Prismacolor 996, and Verte, which is Kelp Green, or 1090. So what I've done is I've put an even layer of the 996 down, and now I'm going to put the green over the top of it. And we do the same thing here that we did when we did the Faber-Castells, and we should be able to get a nice dark neutral black. So we're going to start with the green, or we started with the Raisin, which I put down earlier, and now we're going to overlay the green. And you can see how nice and dark this is already starting to get, because what we want to achieve is kind of a look of black without using a black stick. So we're going to put the same, about the same pressure, about the same amount of green down as we put the Raisin down. This deep, deep violet. And because these are both secondary colors, each has its primaries in it, and will mix quite nicely to give you these dark, rich colors. Now these two colors are not the only two colors you can use. You can try other dark colors and see what kinds of blacks you get. You will get different casts, just as you can see here, this black is much bluer, this one has a little bit more of a green cast. So depending on the pencils you use will determine the kind of bias that your black has in its final state. So we'll do this green, and then we'll go back to the raisin. And look at it carefully so that you get this nice even tone with each layer that you put down. And now we finished with the green. I see a few little places here where it seems a little heavy on the violet. I'm just going to add a little bit more green to those areas just to even them out a little bit more. All right, so now we go back to the violet and we start our second layer of color. So there we have a combination of the violet, or the raisin, and the green to give us a very nice appearance of black, a rich black, I like to call it. And you can see it's similar to the Faber-Castell, but because of the colors, you're getting slightly different casts. Now again, we can use our Lyra blender to smooth this out a little bit and fill in some of the toning in the tooth of the paper. But you do, with Prismacolor, because of the wax base, you do have this problem of getting the layers so heavy that they tend to create a bloom on the page, which kind of gives it this kind of whitish look. And that can be remedied with layers of fixative, but once you put the fixative onto the colored pencil, you cannot work over it again. So that should be the very last step if that's the way you decide to work. You don't have that issue with the Faber-Castells, but because of the wax as the base for the Prismacolor pencils, you do tend to get this bloom. But that doesn't look too bad, actually. You will notice that I did not go as saturated with these neutrals, because usually you'll create a neutral, for your shadow areas on an object, but then you're going to want to put local color over the top of it. So generally speaking, you don't always go to full saturation with the neutrals, whereas you might with the blacks. So that's why we've done this way.